London was glowing softly under the morning sun when a large group of tourists stepped out of their bus near Whitehall. The air felt fresh, filled with the sound of passing cars, distant bells, and the soft clip-clop of horses that often walked along the historic streets. To the visitors, this place felt almost magical. Every building looked as if it had lived a long life, keeping stories inside its stone walls. Among the tourists was a man named Derek. He was in his early 30s, tall, with a restless energy that never seemed to calm down. He liked adventures, attention, and anything that made him feel special. His friends often joked that he behaved like someone who believed the world was his stage. Today was no different. Derek had been talking loudly on the bus all morning, pointing out every little thing and explaining it as if he were a guide, though he had never been to London before. The group's real tour guide, a gentlewoman named Laura, tried her best to keep everyone together. She carried a small flag so her group could spot her easily, but she also needed to keep an eye on people who wandered too far, people like Derek. They began walking toward Horse Guards Parade, one of the city's most admired ceremonial sites. Many tourists looked around with curiosity, admiring the grand architecture. Old arches rose high above them, decorated with the royal crest. The wide-open courtyard stretched ahead, framed by historic buildings that seemed perfect for photos. Everyone was excited to see the famous royal guards on horseback. It was a moment many had waited for, something they had only seen on postcards or travel videos. The guards, known for their shiny uniforms and calm expressions, stood proudly beside their tall horses. The animals were stunning, with polished coats that sparkled under the sunlight. As the group approached, Laura reminded everyone, "Please keep a respectful distance. The guards are working, and the horses need space too. You can take many pictures, but please be careful and don't touch them." Most tourists nodded politely, already pulling out their phones and cameras. They whispered quietly so they wouldn't disturb the peaceful scene. But Derek smirked at the reminder. To him, the rules felt unnecessary. "What's the point of coming here if we don't get close?" he murmured to his friends, who exchanged nervous looks. They knew Derek loved getting attention, and they could almost predict he might try something he shouldn't. Still, they followed him, hoping he would behave this time. The courtyard was filled with people from many countries, families, couples, students, and travelers who wanted to experience a piece of Britain's royal tradition. Small children pointed excitedly at the horses, while parents gently reminded them to stay behind the rope line. Older tourists admired the guards' discipline, impressed by how still and focused they remained. But as everyone admired the scene quietly, Derek stood out. He kept walking faster than the group, moving ahead as if he were on an urgent mission. "Derek, please stay with us," Laura called kindly. He pretended not to hear. On the left side of the courtyard, a tall horse stood beside a guard, dressed in the traditional dark uniform and shiny helmet. The horse was calm and elegant, blinking slowly and adjusting its weight from one leg to the other. People admired its beauty from behind the marked line. "It's amazing how they stay so calm," one woman whispered to her husband. "They're very well trained," he replied softly, smiling as he took photos. Derek stood near them, listening briefly. Then he shrugged. "Calm because they don't do anything all day," he said loudly, laughing at his own comment. The couple gave him an uncomfortable glance and stepped away. Meanwhile, Laura continued guiding the rest of the group, sharing interesting facts about the site. She explained the history of the ceremonial guard, the design of the uniforms, and how the horses were trained from a young age. Her voice carried warmth, making the story more enjoyable. But Derek wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on getting a dramatic photo, something he could post online to impress his followers. He wasn't satisfied with standing behind the rope line like everyone else. As he walked along the barrier, he looked for a spot where he could get closer. His friends, Jake and Ryan, watched him carefully. "Maybe don't do anything risky," Jake said quietly. Yeah, man, Ryan added. Laura said keep some distance. And look, everyone else is staying back. Derek waved his hand. Relax. I'm just getting a better picture. Nothing's going to happen. He leaned forward, holding his phone as far as he could to get the horse in the frame. The horse turned its head slightly, and Derek felt a rush of excitement. Convinced he was getting an amazing shot. Behind him, a small group of tourists noticed his behavior. Some whispered to each other, wondering why he wasn't following the rules. A few children watched him curiously, unsure whether he was allowed to stand so near. Laura finally noticed Derek drifting too close to the restricted area. She excused herself from the rest of the group and walked toward him with a calm smile. Derek, she said gently, please step back a little. The signs are here for everyone's safety, including yours. There's nothing to worry about, Derek replied, lowering his phone for a moment. I just want a cool picture. I understand, Laura said with patience. But you can still get great photos from where everyone else is standing. We don't want to disturb the guard or the horse. Derek sighed as if she were interrupting something important. But after a small pause, he took one step back, though it was clear he was unhappy about it. His friends exhaled with relief, thinking Derek would finally behave. The tourists continued enjoying the sight. Some took pictures of the palace in the background, others zoomed in on the guard's uniform. A group of school children sat in a neat row, sketching the horses as part of an art project. The scene felt peaceful again, but Derek's eyes kept drifting back toward the horse. He watched other tourists taking pictures at a safe distance, and every time someone smiled happily at their photo, he felt a spark of irritation. It's so boring if we just stand here, he muttered. Nobody will remember this picture. His friends exchanged another look. They knew the signs were clear. The barrier was there for a reason. And yet, Derek's mind was already spinning with ideas. Ideas that usually ended in him getting attention, not necessarily in a good way. A family standing nearby noticed Derek edging forward again. The father gently told his children, "Let's give the horse space. It's important to respect working animals." The children nodded obediently, stepping back without complaint. Derek heard the comment, but instead of reflecting, he smirked. He enjoyed being different from everyone else. In his mind, boundaries were challenges, not rules. The crowd continued flowing in and out of the courtyard, but the mild tension around Derek slowly grew. His friends kept whispering warnings. Strangers glanced nervously in his direction. Even Laura watched him from a distance, ready to step in again if needed. But Derek felt something different, an itch for excitement. He wanted a moment that would stand out from everyone else's experience, a moment that made him feel bold. The morning sun rose higher, casting bright light across the courtyard. The horses stood steady, the guards remained disciplined, and the tourists continued snapping photos. Yet somewhere inside this peaceful atmosphere, Derek's restless curiosity was growing stronger. He began planning his next move, something he believed would make his visit unforgettable, without realizing how quickly things could change. For now, though, the moment held its breath. Derek stood near the line, eyes fixed on the horse, unaware that his choices were gently shaping the story that would follow. The courtyard grew busier as the morning moved forward. More tourists arrived, some walking in groups, others wandering freely with cameras hanging from their necks. The soft sound of footsteps mixed with quiet conversations in different languages. Everyone seemed excited to experience this historic place. The royal guards stood still, their calm expressions unchanged despite the growing crowd around them. Their horses remained steady and patient, gently moving their tails or adjusting their feet now and then. People admired their discipline and grace. For many visitors, it felt like watching a living picture. But while the atmosphere remained peaceful, something else was happening in Derek's mind. He had stepped back earlier. But his curiosity had not gone anywhere. He kept glancing toward the horses as if they were calling him closer. His friends hoped he had lost interest, but they could see that familiar spark in his eyes, the spark that meant trouble usually followed. Jake, the more cautious friend, nudged him lightly. "Let's go to the other side," he suggested. "I heard there's a place where you can take pictures with the buildings behind you. It might look really nice." Derek shook his head. "Later. This is the best spot. Look how close we are. I want a picture nobody else has." Ryan spoke softly, trying not to draw attention. "But everyone else is staying behind the line. Maybe there's a reason." "There's a reason for everything," Derek said with a grin. "But rules are boring. Pictures should be exciting." His friends fell silent, unsure of how to convince him. They didn't want to argue, especially in front of a crowd, but they also didn't want Derek to do something he would regret. Still, Derek continued focusing on the horse closest to him, as if he had found a new challenge. Nearby, a gentle breeze carried the faint smell of fresh grass from a small park across the street. The sunlight rested warmly on the old stone walls, making the entire courtyard look even more beautiful. A group of elderly tourists stood together, admiring the architecture and taking pictures at a calm pace. They spoke softly, creating a peaceful tone around them. One of them, an older lady with a wide-brimmed hat, noticed Derek stepping closer to the boundary again. She tapped her companion gently and said quietly, "I hope that young man is careful. The horses are working animals. We must respect them." Her friend nodded. "People should be more mindful. These traditions exist for everyone to enjoy safely." These comments were made in friendly concern, not judgment. But Derek didn't hear them, or perhaps he would not have cared even if he did. His mind was set on getting the perfect photograph. A few minutes later, a different guard walked through the courtyard, speaking kindly but firmly to visitors who were too close to the rope line. His tone remained calm, the type of voice used thousands of times to keep the area safe and organized. When he approached Derek's side of the courtyard, he spoke gently, making sure not to startle anyone. "Please stay behind the line," he said in a polite, professional manner. Derek turned around with a confident smile. "Of course," he said, but the smile looked forced. And his friends knew he hadn't really changed his mind. After the guard walked away, Jake whispered, "See? They're telling everyone the same thing. Just enjoy the moment." Derek shrugged. "I heard him. But look, everyone else keeps their distance because they're afraid. I'm not afraid." "It's not about fear," Ryan replied kindly. "It's about respect." But Derek was already distracted again. A family nearby was taking turns posing with the horse in the background. They followed the rules carefully, staying behind the marked line. Their photos turned out lovely, filled with smiles and excitement. The children laughed happily as their parents encouraged them to wave at the horse from a safe distance. Derek watched them and shook his head. Those pictures looked the same as everyone else's. Jake sighed softly. "But they look happy." "I want something better," Derek insisted. He looked around and saw an area where the rope line seemed slightly lower. It wasn't meant for stepping over, just a point where the ground dipped slightly. But to Derek, it looked like an opportunity. Before he could act, a young woman standing nearby noticed his intention. She spoke kindly, hoping to help rather than criticize. "Excuse me," she said gently. "The signs say to stay behind the line. It's easy to get too close without meaning to." Derek looked at her, surprised that a stranger had spoken to him. "I'm fine," he said quickly, trying to sound confident. "I'm not doing anything wrong." The woman nodded politely. "I understand. Just be careful. These horses are sensitive to movement." Derek turned away, pretending not to care. But her words echoed in his mind for a moment. He didn't want people thinking he was reckless. He wanted them to think he was bold, not careless. Yet even that small moment didn't stop his growing desire to prove something. More tourists continued to gather, and soon the courtyard felt lively and bright. Laura, the tour guide, stood with the rest of the group, answering questions about the history of the site. Her calm voice blended naturally with the environment, offering interesting stories about the royal guards and their traditions. She looked around to check on everyone. When she saw Derek again, she felt a small wave of concern. She had guided many groups over the years, and she could always tell when someone was about to test a rule. Derek's restless movements and constant glances toward the horse were clear signals. She decided to stay nearby, just in case. Derek noticed her watching him, but interpreted it as a challenge. He didn't want to be treated like a child. He wanted to show that he could handle himself, that he could do something interesting without causing trouble. He took a small step forward, not enough to cross the boundary, but enough to make his friends tense. "Derek," Jake said quietly, "you're going to make people uncomfortable. They're not here to watch someone take risks. They just want to enjoy the day." "This is supposed to be fun," Derek replied, "and I'm having fun." "But your fun shouldn't be stressful for everyone else," Ryan added gently. Derek didn't respond. His attention had already drifted back to the horse. The animal stood calmly, its dark coat shining beautifully. It gave a soft, relaxed snort as it shifted slightly. The scene felt peaceful, almost like a painting. But Derek saw it differently. To him, the closeness felt like a challenge waiting to be conquered. The horse's calm behavior made him believe nothing could go wrong. He felt confident he could get the perfect moment if he just moved a little closer. Behind him, more concerned glances were exchanged among the tourists. People didn't want to interfere, but they also didn't want to witness something uncomfortable. They hoped Derek would simply enjoy the view and stay where he was supposed to be. Even the light seemed to quiet down for a moment, resting softly across the courtyard as if holding its breath. Laura approached again with a warm, patient tone. "Everyone is getting great photos from where they're standing," she said gently. "You don't need to be any closer. It's safer for both you and the horse." Derek exhaled slowly, pretending he was simply adjusting his camera. But inside, his curiosity was growing stronger than ever. The rope line felt like an invisible wall, and Derek had never liked walls. The more he looked at it, the more it bothered him. It wasn't fear that held people back. It was rules. And Derek had always been the type who believed rules were optional if you were careful. But he was forgetting something important. Rules were there to protect, not restrict. Still, the thought didn't reach him. He convinced himself he could get close without causing any trouble. Just a few more steps, he thought. Just enough to get one amazing photo. One moment that would make the whole trip worth remembering. Around him, the peaceful morning continued with gentle movement and soft chatter. But Derek's focus narrowed until it felt like the whole courtyard existed only for his idea. He tightened his grip on his phone. His friends took a step closer, silently hoping to stop him before he crossed the line. A soft breeze passed through the courtyard, moving Derek's hair slightly. The horse blinked slowly, unaware of the thoughts running through his mind. The moment stretched, fragile and expectant. And with his curiosity rising higher than caution, Derek prepared to take the step that would change everything that followed. The courtyard felt almost dreamlike as the sun rose higher, spreading warm light across the old stone ground. The shadows grew shorter, and the horses' coats looked even shinier under the gentle glow. Visitors continued taking photos, laughing softly, and admiring the royal guards who stood proudly in their traditional uniforms. Everything looked calm and perfectly in place. But Derek's thoughts were far from calm. He kept thinking about the photo he wanted, the one that would make his trip feel truly exciting. He imagined posting it online, receiving compliments, and being the center of attention. The more he imagined it, the more he felt he needed to get closer to the horse. not to disturb it, not to bother anyone, but simply because he wanted a unique memory. His friends could sense his growing determination. Jake kept glancing at him with worried eyes while Ryan kept softly tapping his arm, as if reminding him to stay grounded. "Let's just enjoy this peacefully," Jake said gently. Derek nodded, but didn't mean it. His thoughts were already drifting beyond the boundary line. The horse closest to him, Artemis, stood quietly, breathing slowly and calmly, as if he had been doing this job all his life. His dark, shiny coat reflected the sunlight, and his long eyelashes blinked softly over his peaceful eyes. Even people who didn't like animals much found him beautiful. His presence had a gentle strength that made the scene feel almost magical. Artemis shifted his feet slightly, a natural movement for a working horse standing still for long periods. His saddle gleamed with polished leather, and the guard sitting on his back held the reins with practiced ease. The guard remained steady, looking straight ahead as part of his duty. A group of school children nearby watched Artemis with wide eyes. One little boy whispered to his mother, "He looks like a storybook horse." His mother smiled and nodded. Yes, Artemis did look like a horse from a fairy tale. And this only made Derek more determined to take an unforgettable picture. He stepped closer to the boundary line again, not crossing it, just standing right at the edge, pretending to adjust his phone settings. His friends exchanged worried glances, but didn't want to cause a scene by pulling him back. The moment felt quiet around him. He could hear the soft breathing of the horse, the distant chatter of tourists, and the gentle sound of the wind brushing past the courtyard walls. Everything seemed peaceful, but inside Derek's mind a small voice kept pushing him. "Just one good picture. Nothing bad will happen. You're careful. You can handle this." He took a slow breath and leaned a little forward, holding his phone out. He didn't touch the horse. He didn't step over the line. He was simply closer than others would usually dare to stand. His phone camera clicked softly as he took a few pictures. They looked nice, but Derek wasn't satisfied. He wanted something even better, a picture where the horse looked directly at him. He waited, and then, as if sensing someone nearby, Artemis gently turned his head. This tiny movement made Derek's heart jump with excitement. "Perfect," he whispered, raising his phone again. But Artemis was a sensitive and intelligent horse. He could sense small changes in the air, shifts in movement, closeness of people, and different kinds of energy around him. Derek's sudden excitement and closeness made Artemis curious. Not startled, not frightened, just curious. Artemis leaned his head slightly toward Derek the way a gentle horse sometimes investigates a new person. His warm breath brushed lightly against Derek's sleeve, making Derek freeze in surprise. The crowd noticed the horse's movement, and a few people gasped softly. Not in fear, but in surprise. Horses didn't usually react to tourists unless someone was very close. Derek didn't move. For a moment, he felt an unexpected mix of excitement and nervousness. He had wanted a close moment, yes, but he hadn't expected it to happen so naturally. Artemis's big eyes looked calm, reflecting Derek's face like small mirrors. Then, in a soft, harmless, almost playful way, Artemis nudged Derek's sleeve with his lips. It wasn't a bite. It wasn't harmful. It was more like a curious nibble, the kind horses sometimes give when exploring something that catches their attention. His lips brushed the fabric lightly, tugging it just enough to surprise Derek. Derek's sleeve pulled gently, creating a small shift in the cloth. The movement felt unexpected but not painful at all, just surprising, like when a friendly dog nudges someone's arm to get their attention. Derek's eyes widened. "Oh!" he gasped softly, stepping back on instinct. A small laugh spread through the nearby crowd, not mocking but amused in a light-hearted, friendly way. Several people smiled at the innocent moment. A little girl giggled and whispered, "The horse likes him." The guard atop Artemis did not move his head, but Derek thought he saw the slightest adjustment in the guard's posture, perhaps a sign that he was aware but not alarmed. It was clear that Artemis's gentle nudge was harmless and normal for a curious horse, but Derek felt something more than surprise. He felt suddenly humbled. For weeks, he had imagined himself as someone who could do anything, someone who didn't need to follow rules, someone who could create his own path even in a crowd. But in that very moment, standing before a calm, powerful horse who had simply nudged his sleeve out of curiosity, Derek felt small in a strangely comforting way. The horse had not pushed him away. The horse had not frightened him. The horse had simply reacted naturally, reminding Derek that animals, like people, have boundaries, feelings, and instinctive behaviors. As Derek stepped back behind the rope line, Jake and Ryan rushed toward him. "Are you okay?" Jake asked. Yeah, Derek said, still processing what had happened. "He just touched my sleeve." Ryan smiled with relief. "Well, at least it was gentle." "It was," Derek admitted. A kind lady standing nearby offered a warm smile. "Horses are curious creatures," she said. "Sometimes they check things with their lips. They mean no harm." Derek nodded, feeling grateful for her reassurance. But what he didn't expect was the deep feeling rising inside him, a mix of embarrassment, respect, and reflection. He had been trying so hard to show off, but instead he received a gentle reminder that nature has its own way of teaching lessons. More tourists started talking softly about the moment. Some said it was amusing. Others said it made them admire the horse even more. Laura moved closer, her expression gentle but clearly relieved. "I'm glad you're all right," she said softly. "Horses sometimes explore the world around them. It's good you stepped back." "I know," Derek said quietly. He wasn't defensive this time. He wasn't annoyed. He simply felt calm. Artemis had already returned to his original position, standing tall and peaceful once again. It was as if nothing had happened. The guard remained composed, continuing his duty as tourists looked on with renewed appreciation for the incredible discipline and training that went into this ceremonial role. Derek looked at Artemis one more time, not with a challenge in his eyes, but with genuine respect. He didn't take any more photos. He didn't try to go close again. He simply stood with the others, feeling something new inside him, a softness that came from realizing that some moments are not meant to be controlled, but understood. Jake placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "Well," he said with a small smile, "you got a moment nobody else did." Derek smiled, a real humble smile. "Yeah," he said softly, "and I'm glad it was gentle." The crowd slowly returned to its normal flow, the peaceful rhythm of the courtyard continuing as always. But for Derek, the moment had quietly changed something inside him, preparing him for everything that would come next. The moment after Artemis gently tugged Derek's sleeve stayed in the air longer than expected. Even though it had been light and harmless, it had shifted the energy around Derek completely. His heart was still beating faster than usual, not out of fear, but from the surprise of being noticed by such a majestic animal. For the first time since the group had arrived, Derek wasn't thinking about photos, attention, or proving anything. Instead, he felt something softer, almost like gratitude. Artemis had responded to him, but not in the dramatic, exciting way he had imagined. It had been small, natural, and real. In that simplicity, Derek found himself thinking more deeply than he had all morning. Tourists whispered gently among themselves, smiling at the harmless moment. "That was sweet," someone said. "The horse must have been curious," another added. "Good thing he stepped back," a third person whispered with relief. Even though the comments were mild and kind, Derek felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. He didn't like being the center of attention in this way, not for something he shouldn't have been doing. He had wanted admiration, not gentle scolding from strangers' eyes. Jake and Ryan walked with him to a quieter corner of the courtyard. Derek avoided eye contact for a moment, unsure how to explain how he felt. Jake began softly, "Hey, you're okay. It was just a small moment." "Yeah," Ryan added. "No big deal." Derek let out a slow breath. "I know. But I shouldn't have been that close. I get it now." His friends exchanged a quick, relieved glance. They had been waiting for Derek to say something like this all morning. It wasn't often that he admitted he was wrong, or even uncertain. This was a rare moment. Before they could continue talking, two event staff members walked toward them calmly. They weren't upset or strict. They wore friendly expressions, the kind people use when they want to handle a situation gently. "Good morning," one of them said politely. "Could we speak with you for a moment, just to check if everything is all right?" Derek nodded quickly, trying to appear calm and respectful. "Yes, of course, I'm fine." "That's good to hear," the staff member said with a warm smile. "We just wanted to remind you, like everyone else, that the horses need a bit of space. They're trained and calm, but they still respond naturally to people who stand too close." "I understand," Derek replied honestly. "I got closer than I should have. It won't happen again." The staff member nodded, pleased with the response. "Thank you for saying that. We appreciate your understanding. We want everyone to enjoy their visit safely." His tone was friendly, not harsh. Derek felt grateful for that. The second staff member added kindly, "And don't worry. The horse didn't seem bothered. He was just being curious. But please stay behind the line from now on." "I will," Derek promised. The conversation was brief but meaningful. Derek could feel the eyes of several tourists on him, but the staff members didn't make him feel embarrassed. They simply reminded him of what mattered: safety, respect, and mindfulness. When the staff members walked away, Derek sighed again, not from frustration, but from relief. He hadn't been scolded, punished, or embarrassed in front of everyone. Instead, he felt gently guided toward better behavior. It was a strange yet comforting feeling. Laura, their tour guide, approached next. She had waited patiently for the staff members to speak first. She always tried to respect the process and avoid overwhelming anyone. "Derek," she said softly, "I'm glad you're okay. I saw the moment from a distance. It looked surprising but not harmful." Derek nodded. "It surprised me. But yeah, he was gentle." "I'm glad to hear that," she said with a kind smile. "Horses can be very curious, especially when someone stands close. They might explore with their noses or lips without meaning anything bad." "I didn't know that," Derek admitted. "Most people don't," Laura replied. "That's why we ask everyone to stay a little back. It keeps the animals comfortable and the visitors relaxed." Derek looked down at his sleeve, where Artemis had tugged the fabric lightly. There was no damage, just a faint, stretched wrinkle where the horse's lips had pressed. It was so small that nobody would notice unless Derek pointed it out. Jake noticed his expression and laughed softly. "You've got a story on your sleeve now." "Yeah," Ryan added with a grin. "Most people just take pictures. You got a personal moment." Derek chuckled shyly. "Not exactly the moment I planned. But maybe the one you needed?" Laura suggested gently. Derek blinked. He wasn't used to people speaking to him in thoughtful ways, but her words felt strangely true. Maybe he had needed a quiet reminder. Not dramatic, not scary, just real. The group walked back toward the main area, joining the other tourists who continued enjoying their visit. Some took photos of the architecture. Others admired the horses. A few sketched the scene in notebooks. Everyone seemed relaxed and content. But Derek felt different, more aware, more grounded. He looked at Artemis from a distance now, understanding the importance of giving space. The horse looked peaceful again, standing tall and proud beside the guard. As Derek observed from afar, he noticed small details he had missed earlier. The gentle rise and fall of the horse's breathing, the shine on his polished hooves, the steady rhythm of his tail swaying to keep off tiny insects. Artemis seemed almost like a symbol of calm strength. Laura gathered the group together again. "Before we move on to the next location," she said, "take a final look around if you'd like. This place holds a lot of history and tradition." People nodded and spread out a little, soaking in the last few moments. Derek stood quietly between Jake and Ryan. He no longer felt the urge to take risks or stand out. Instead, he felt something new, a sense of appreciation. Not the kind that comes from excitement or adventure, but from understanding. Jake leaned close and nudged him gently. "You okay?" "Yes," Derek answered. "Actually, better than okay. I feel like I learned something." Ryan smiled. "That's good, man." "It is," Derek agreed. "I didn't think one tiny moment could make me think this much." Jake chuckled. "Sometimes tiny moments teach big lessons." The boys stood quietly for a moment, watching the courtyard. A little girl walked by holding her mother's hand. She pointed at Artemis and said loudly, "Look, Mommy, that's the horse that looked at the man's sleeve." Her mother laughed softly. "Yes, sweetheart. He was just curious." Derek felt his cheeks warm again. But this time he smiled. The moment had become a sweet memory for others, not a mistake. It was comforting to know that people saw it as a gentle and amusing experience, not something negative. When it was time to leave, Laura led the group toward the next destination. Before turning away, Derek looked back at Artemis one more time. The horse stood still, elegant and calm, completely unaware of the quiet lesson he had given someone that day. Derek whispered to himself, "Thank you." Not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but sincere enough to stay in his heart. As he followed the group, Derek walked with a lighter step. He felt different, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, meaningful way that made him see the world a little more clearly. The courtyard behind him remained peaceful, filled with new visitors, new moments, and the gentle presence of the royal horses. But for Derek, that place would always hold a special memory, a simple reminder that respect, kindness, and awareness create the best experiences. And without realizing it, he carried that newfound understanding with him as the day continued. Derek walked with the group as they left Horse Guards Parade, but his steps felt different now. Earlier in the day, he had been rushing ahead, chasing excitement, wanting to stand out. But now he moved more slowly, taking in the world around him with a quieter mind. The city seemed more beautiful, more meaningful, and more peaceful than before. The sound of traffic blended with the soft chatter of tourists walking nearby. A gentle breeze passed between the historic buildings, making small flags flutter above doorways. Derek looked around, admiring details he had missed earlier. It was as if his eyes had opened wider, noticing the simple beauty in everything. His friends, Jake and Ryan, walked on either side of him. They didn't tease him or bring up what had happened. They didn't need to. They could tell Derek was thinking deeply, and they wanted to give him space to process his thoughts. After a few minutes, Derek spoke softly. "You know, I didn't expect today to teach me anything." Jake smiled. "Unexpected lessons are the best kind." Ryan chuckled. "At least yours didn't come from something scary. It was a tiny moment, but it meant something." "Yeah," Derek agreed. "It was harmless, but it made me think more than anything else on this trip." They continued walking behind the group until Laura stopped near a peaceful park. She gave everyone a short break, letting them rest on benches, buy snacks, or simply enjoy the scenery. Trees lined the walkway, and children played quietly in a grassy area nearby. Derek sat on a bench under the shade of a large tree. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warm sunlight touch his face. He felt calm, something he rarely felt. Even Jake and Ryan noticed the change. "You're unusually quiet," Jake said gently. "Yeah," Derek replied with a soft laugh. "I just keep thinking about that moment." Ryan sat down beside him. "You mean the horse touching your sleeve?" "Yeah," Derek said. "It was such a small thing, but it made me realize how careless I was being. I wasn't respecting the rules or the animals. I was only thinking about myself." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes we all forget to think about the bigger picture." Derek sighed, but it wasn't a heavy sigh. It was the kind that carries reflection and relief. "I guess I always try to make everything exciting. I forget that some moments are meant to be calm." Ryan smiled. "Calm moments can be interesting too." Derek looked at them both and smiled. "You're right." Across the park, Laura was speaking with a family in a friendly, calm tone. She was patient with everyone, answering questions with enthusiasm and kindness. Derek watched her and felt grateful. She hadn't been harsh when he made a mistake. She had been gentle, respectful, and understanding, something he really appreciated now. When the break was over, the group gathered once again. Laura announced the next part of the tour and guided them toward a nearby street filled with charming shops and cafes. Derek walked with the group, feeling much lighter than earlier. They passed a bakery with a warm smell drifting out of the open door. Derek paused and took a deep breath. "Smells amazing," he said. Ryan grinned. "We can grab something later." For the first time that day, Derek didn't feel like rushing or trying to be impressive. He simply enjoyed the small things, the smell of pastries, the soft music coming from a nearby store, the sight of tourists laughing gently as they searched for souvenirs. It surprised him how peaceful the world felt when he wasn't trying to prove anything. Eventually, the group reached a broad, open plaza where they could rest before heading back to the bus. People sat on stone steps, enjoyed drinks, or took cheerful photos of each other. Derek found a comfortable spot under a tall lamppost and stood there, thinking. He took out his phone, opened the photo he had taken earlier, and stared at the picture of Artemis. The horse looked calm, noble, and powerful. Derek stared at the photo for a long time, remembering how close he had been, how curious the horse had been, and how naturally the moment had unfolded. He whispered to himself, "I didn't need to go beyond the line. The moment came to me anyway." It was true. He had spent so much of his life chasing excitement, trying to create special moments by breaking rules or pushing boundaries. But today had shown him something different. Special moments don't always need to be created. They can happen on their own when people are respectful, patient, and open-minded. Jake walked over with a drink in his hand and offered one to Derek. "Here." "Thanks," Derek said, taking it. Jake looked down at the picture on Derek's phone. "That's actually a pretty great photo." "It is," Derek agreed. "And I didn't have to do anything crazy to get it." Ryan joined them, munching on a small pastry. "See? Sometimes the best moments are simple." Derek nodded, feeling the truth of those words deep inside. A few minutes later, Laura walked over to check on them. "How are you three doing?" she asked kindly. "We're good," Jake said. "Great," Ryan added. Derek looked up with a gentle smile. "Thank you for being kind earlier." Laura smiled warmly. "You handled everything very maturely afterward. Not everyone reflects so openly. That shows a lot of growth." Derek felt a small sense of pride, not the showy kind he usually sought, but a genuine kind. "I learned something important today," Laura nodded. "Traveling teaches us things books can't. I'm glad you found something meaningful in your experience." They talked for a moment longer before she returned to the rest of the group. As the plaza filled with soft afternoon light, Derek felt an unexpected but welcome sensation, a sense of maturity. He realized that his visit to London would always be connected to this moment, not because of excitement, but because of understanding. The group finally returned to the bus. As Derek took his seat beside his friends, he glanced out the window toward the city streets. People walked with purpose, laughter floated in the air, and the world felt full of gentle stories unfolding everywhere. Jake leaned over and said, "So, what did you learn today?" Derek chuckled softly. "A lot," he said honestly. "I learned that rules aren't there to stop fun. They help keep things peaceful. I learned that animals deserve respect. And I learned that I don't need to do something wild to make a memory. Real moments happen in simple ways." Ryan nodded with a smile. "That's a good lesson." As the bus started moving, Derek looked at the photo of Artemis one more time. The horse's calm expression made him feel strangely connected to the moment. Derek gently touched his sleeve where Artemis had nudged earlier. It was such a small thing, but it held a big meaning for him now. He whispered quietly to himself, "I'll remember this." The bus drove forward, carrying Derek toward the rest of his day. But a part of him remained in that peaceful courtyard, with the calm horse, the steady guard, and the gentle lesson that had changed his heart in a simple, beautiful way. And in that quiet transformation, Derek realized something important. Sometimes the smallest moments shape us the most.